Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys. And we've had to wait a couple of weeks to mention this because we took time off last week for Jade Wally's FAIRtax World. Wally's FAIRtax World.
Yeah.
What an interesting discussion. I would strongly suggest if you missed that to go back and check it out on FAIRtaxGuys.com. But
Jade was pretty brave to handle the subject of income inequality, but great discussion.
He did it really well. But so we wanted again to acknowledge and thank Bob Scarborough for having us up in Winston-Salem, which now it's a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, that was great. It was great. Even though I forgot to bring our video camera, we managed with our cell phones.
Yeah, the cell phone video worked pretty well. I'm not sure you could tell the difference, but and I was excited to hear that the FAIRtax Power Radio Network has expanded by a couple of stations.
Very good news. Very good news.
I don't think the audience has heard this. Yes, the owners of WTOB bought the license of a station that had gone dark there in Burlington. It was the original WBIG. They've now changed it to WWBG, and they just kind of repeat WTOB's programming, including FAIRtax Power Radio. So that one, and I think WCOG, the old station in Greensboro, is the same way now. So we've got a couple more stations that they're not really standalone stations. They take the same programming WTOB does, but hey, that's more.
But it
folks
expands our reach. Instead of just one station, WTOB, in Winston-Salem. Now we've got one or two stations over in the Greensboro area.
Greensboro and Burlington. Those are kind of the next two towns headed east from Winston-Salem. So
wonderful.
Thank Bob Scarborough for his efforts on that, and we look forward to coming back up and seeing him again, and maybe he'll go to the baseball game with us next time. Okay, can I dig in now?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, my favorite part of the program, our Congress.gov segment. And it was funny. Last night I was looking at this to kind of get a preview of what I think we use today. And when you go to the search bar, type in Internal Revenue Code in quotes. This
is Congress.gov.
Yeah, look at the 117th Congress, legislation only. Last night when I was looking this up, it had 1,026 hits on that search. Get here today to record the program, and now it's 1,042. That many overnight were added to the.
Holy man!
It is insane what Congress is doing with the tax code. So let me start with this one, H.R. 4674 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to make permanent the 7-year recovery period for motorsports entertainment complexes, and I picked that one just because I'm a NASCAR fan. But they've got this 7-year recovery period for motorsports entertainment complexes, which apparently is temporary at the moment, and this bill wants to make that permanent. And since I don't run motorsports entertainment complexes, I'm not really sure how this applies or what it does, but the motorsports thing caught my eye. I'll have to say that one. Now, here's one. This is kind of the crazy one. H.R. 4642 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to repeal, let me get this, to repeal the limitation on the cover-over of distilled spirits taxes to Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands and for other purposes. Now, I'm still not sure I understand that.
No, I have to admit.
To amend the Internal Revenue Code to repeal the limitation on the cover-over of distilled spirits taxes to Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands and for other purposes. So somebody can jump into the comments and explain that one. That would be kind of cool.
That would be helpful. Obviously, that's got tax professional lingo in it.
This is the kind of ridiculousness that needs to go away. That's in the there's a lot of course, that one's just a proposal, but there's a lot of stuff like that that's already in there.
Ridiculousness?
Yes, my radio training caught me that word. But there's a lot of that in the tax code. We need to get rid of it, pull it all out by the roots, replace it with a fair tax, and be done with it all. Now, this one caught my eye last night. This one was here last night. S2420, a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide a credit for the purchase of certain new electric bicycles.
Oh.
We had one on bicycle commuting a while back.
Yeah.
Now we're getting one for you get a credit for the purchase of certain new electric bicycles. Now, I knew that they put small gasoline motors on a regular bicycle before.
Yeah.
I guess it doesn't surprise me that they're putting electric motors on bicycles now.
And I've seen my son-in-law has one of these, and they can make the electric motor so small now, and yet still have some effect. And the battery is built into the frame and so forth. But apparently, that's the direction that our masters in D.C. want us to go in. Yeah.
Well, so, I looked this up. I had never seen electric bicycles before, so I looked them up last night. They ain't cheap.
Oh,
the most expensive one I found was about $2,000.
My word.
And the least expensive one I found was like $600. And I have no idea how much a regular pedal-powered bicycle costs. I haven't bought one of those in decades. It's probably nowhere near that much. But you can get a credit for the purchase of certain now, not all, certain new electric bicycles. So there's no doubt a lobbyist behind that one. That's S2420. And one more. And this one makes the Hall of Shame that we're going to go into at the end of the year.
He showed me this one earlier.
Under the, what the heck is this doing in the tax code category? H.R. 4553 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to, get this, facilitate water leasing and water transfers to promote conservation and efficiency. What the heck does that have to do with collecting taxes?
Nothing that I can think of, but again, it's an indication of how members of Congress treat this tax code. They use it as a tool to not only indoctrinate, but manage every aspect of American life. Whereas the tax code should be there just to raise revenue, okay? Just raise revenue for the federal government, leave us alone. And there's only one plan that does that.
The FAIRtax, absolutely. That's H.R. 4553. There's a companion Senate bill that does the same thing. Where was it? It was down here. There it is, S2383. The same wording. So you're going to facilitate water leasing and water transfers to promote conservation and efficiency through the tax code. Good luck.
And instead of all this nonsense, we would much rather defund the IRS because taxpayers matter.
Indeed.
And this only is accomplished with the FAIRtax.
Absolutely.
So
now, we're kind of a couple of weeks behind real time here because we took last week off for Wally's FAIRtax World.
Yeah.
We got some new co-sponsors. I mean, 3 of them in real short order.
Oh, yeah.
Including Byron Donalds. We have been working on him. He signed the FAIRtax candidate pledge as a candidate. It's taken him from January, when Congress convened, to now late July to sign on, but he finally did. So to his credit, we will thank him for that. And there's another one that was on there last Congress that is just now signing back on.
Yeah.
You're looking that information up now.
I'm on Congress.gov, and I typed into the search bar HR 25, and when I click the HR 25 in the title, it takes me to summary, text, actions, so forth. Co-sponsors. 26. We're up to 26.
Yes, that's
okay. Big. And now we mentioned while we were up in North Carolina that we had secured the co-sponsorship, you might say. Anyways, Representative Robert Whitman of Virginia 1st District became a co-sponsor on July 13th.
Yes, and we did our WTOB show on the 18th, so that was less than a week.
And so, and then we got recently on the 20th, we got 2 people. Scott DeJaris, I believe that's how you pronounce it, Tennessee 4, and Byron Donalds, Florida 19.
Now, the one from Tennessee is the one I was referring to earlier. Remember, right shortly after Congress convened, Jim Bennett did a Grassroots Corner listing a bunch of different folks. One of those lists were people that were in the previous Congress, the 116th Congress, who were co-sponsors, who were reelected to the 117th Congress and had not been on yet.
Yeah.
So now I think there's just one left.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of back and forth between Jim Bennett and somebody named Doug Dash and Randy and Steve and all kinds of people, because there's a certain amount of excitement when we get more co-sponsors, and when we get 3 co-sponsors in a short time. Paul Livingston, who's the president of the Florida FAIRtax here in Florida, all right, he wrote, "Doug, how did you manage this?" And he says, "Hi, Paul, thank you. With the help of Jim Bennett, I obtained a list of the previous co-sponsors who had not yet signed on in the new congressional session. I then assigned myself the task of getting them to co-sponsor H.R. 25 again. I contacted them repeatedly, by phone, by email, by fax, whatever it took. All right. Originally there were 8, but now it's down to 1. Tom Emmer of Minnesota. I also wrote to Governor Noem, that's in South Dakota, asking her to request the representatives, her representatives, to become co-sponsors. No reply yet. Incidentally, about 5 years ago, 3 of us from New Jersey went to D.C. To the office of Marsha Blackburn, met with her tax liaison. As part of our presentation, we mentioned the fact that 2 representatives from her state were already co-sponsors. A while later, she signed on. As you can see, you don't necessarily have to be from a particular state to influence a politician. Thanks to you and all your folks for your great work. So that's a great email from Doug Dash, and it's a good lesson for volunteers.
Yeah, I'd like to meet that guy.
Yeah.
He would. And
it would be
course,
good.
Most politicians will give preference to their constituents that live in their district and can vote for them, but don't let that be a restriction on you. If you want to work on somebody that's outside your district, have at it. Thanks, Doug. You've done the fair tax movement a great service.
Yep. Yeah, so I like that. That's a good lesson for all the volunteers, all the supporters, all right? Your voice does matter, okay? And so let your voice be heard to anybody that'll listen, whether it's another person who has not heard of the fair tax, whether it's a politician, a candidate, somebody who hasn't co-sponsored yet. Keep talking.
Keep talking. That should be easy enough to do. Yep. Now, there was something that was going around, a discussion on some of the fair tax messenger boards and things that were going around. Somebody was asking a "what happens if" question.
Yes.
And this looks like a really good thing to ask our audience now. If you have a "what happens if" scenario regarding the fair tax, send us your idea or your question at the FAIRtaxGuys@gmail.com. So we're going to kind of fill out the rest of this episode going through the what happens ifs that we know about. Yeah. But I'm sure there's more than just the couple we've got here.
Yeah, so, I'm sure. Yeah.
So I don't know that we can offer a prize this time, but maybe Lance will give us something. I'm sure Carlos will. But they'll just send what happens if under the fair tax. And what they were talking about earlier was something that I don't think is really going to happen, but it is a scenario that bears looking at.
Yeah, it's worth addressing.
That the fair tax contains a sunset clause.
All right.
The idea is that the framers of the fair tax want to make absolutely stone cold certain that we don't end up with the income tax back on top of the fair tax. The fair tax itself repeals all of the legislative authority to collect an income tax right now, but of course an act of Congress like the fair tax cannot touch the Constitution.
Yeah.
And so it's the 16th Amendment, we talked about it a lot here on the FTPR, that came in 1913, that makes it constitutionally permissible for the federal government to collect an income tax. And the framers of the fair tax said, all right, wait a minute, we want to make sure that we never get an income tax reimposed on top of the fair tax. So in order for the fair tax to be permanently implemented, the 16th Amendment would have to be repealed, and there's a 7-year window for the process of doing that.
That's right. Yeah, the 16th Amendment must be repealed. All right.
Yeah, it must. But because of that sunset clause in there, I had always heard the story, and I'm finding out now that that's really not the case. I had always heard the story that if the fair tax has to sunset under that clause because the 16th Amendment was not repealed, that we just automatically get the income tax back.
Yeah,
and we're finding out that really that's not the case.
No.
We several people, and we ran this by Steve Hayes, the president of the Americans for Fair Taxation, just to make sure that we weren't propagating misinformation. That will get you banned off of Facebook these days. But make sure that what we are saying is accurate. And what happens if the fair tax actually sunsets, then poof, suddenly the federal government has no mechanism for collecting revenue at all.
That's absolutely right, all right, because we've mentioned before, in the language of the fair tax. Now, first off, the fair tax is only like 130 pages, and a good portion of that is rescinding the current statutes that establish the income tax, and there's a lot of them, okay? So they list all those statutes. That means when the fair tax passes, when Congress passes it...
I'm glad you like when, not if. When.
Yes. When the fair tax passes and is signed by the president and the fair tax becomes law, there is no more income tax statutes. They're gone because it's part of the fair tax legislation that the income tax statutes are rescinded, gone, evaporated, exploded, however you want to say it, they're gone.
But the fair tax could not in itself repeal the 16th Amendment. We have to go through the normal constitutional amendment process for that to happen.
Right, yeah.
But so if the fair tax, for some reason, sunsets because the 16th Amendment is still hanging around 7 years later, then Congress is going to really have to scramble to put something in place. And Bob's prediction here, I would bet that they would not have the gall to reimpose an income tax. Think, you've been, for the past 7 years, people will have gotten their entire paycheck with no withholding.
Yeah.
There would be no IRS, no tax returns, no audits, and people would be getting the prebate on a monthly basis. Now, how are the politicians, even the ones that are just, horribly addicted to the income tax, how are the politicians going to reimpose the income tax after people have been used to all of the benefits of the fair tax?
I can just see the politicians now. Remember the good old days when we had the income tax and the IRS? We need to get those back. Yeah, I'm thinking tars and feathers.
Yeah, do you remember the Fair Tax Power Radio episode we did when we looked at what would it be if we'd reversed it? What would it be if the fair tax were the law of the land and a politician were trying to sell someone on the idea that the income tax was better? If I remember right, you lost that debate pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's a tough sell. So I just can't believe that the country is going to go back to an income tax, but
it's constitutionally possible.
Yeah,
but I'm not sure it's going to be practical. That if anybody wants to get reelected to Congress, I don't see them putting the income tax back in to replace the fair tax.
Yeah.
In fact, read what Steve Hayes wrote to us here.
Yeah, it's very interesting, Steve. Technically, if the bill passes as it is now, the fair tax would go away. Okay, at the end of the 7 years. Of course, you are right. They would have to start over again to enact a new tax system. Yeah, because there would be nothing there. All right. If the fair tax works as well as we think it will, Congress would ignore this and just let the fair tax continue. Yeah, because that's a whole lot easier. I just can't imagine Congress trying to sell the American people, we need to go back to the good old days of the income tax and the IRS and get rid of this fair tax. It's not going to sell.
Well, hopefully if they do have to repass a fair tax legislation, that the new legislation would have another 7-year period in it.
Yeah.
Do not want any possibility that there could be an income tax reimposed on top of the fair. Now, I don't trust the Congress critters not to do that. And apparently the writers of the fair tax bill didn't either, because they insisted that the fair tax include this provision that if the 16th Amendment's not repealed, then the fair tax doesn't stay permanently. And of course, if the 16th Amendment is repealed, then income taxes become unconstitutional.
Okay. It occurs to me that the fair tax is going to pass with a groundswell of grassroots support. All right, it's going to take everyday American citizens to emphasize this in the strongest possible terms with their elected officials to get the fair tax. I think the same thing will happen with the repeal of the 16th Amendment. If Congress doesn't have the fortitude to repeal the 16th Amendment, all right, then again the citizens can do this through the Convention of States.
Correct.
All right? We can take things into our own hands, the Convention of States, and I know there are some people out there that believe erroneously that the Convention of States could be a runaway convention. It's not possible. Okay.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
But the Convention of States can repeal the 16th Amendment. That may be the way we have to do it.
Yeah, because the biggest impediment to getting the 16th Amendment repealed is going to be the fact that it takes a supermajority in Congress to even propose a constitutional amendment and send it out to the states for ratification.
Yep.
Now, the Convention of States, let me make sure people understand this, the Convention of States itself cannot repeal the 16th Amendment.
Right.
This Convention of States can put forth an amendment calling for the 16th Amendment's repeal, like they did with Prohibition. They passed an amendment for Prohibition, then a later amendment repealed that one.
Right.
But yeah, the Convention of States can get that proposal out to the states for ratification without needing the 2/3 supermajority in Congress. And I'm afraid there are a lot of people in Congress that are just hopelessly addicted to the income tax.
It would take a supermajority of the states to do it.
It takes 3/4 of the states to ratify an amendment.
Yes,
and I think that once the amendment to repeal the 16th Amendment, get rid of the income tax, goes out to the states for ratification, that's going to be ratified in lightning speed.
I think so.
The problem will be getting that through Congress to get it out to the states, and if Congress doesn't want to do it, then we have to go the COS route. But we got a couple other things that we want. One other quick what if, because we're running out of time here.
Yeah.
What happens if, and this is one that I have always been, kind of afraid of. What happens if the lobbyists start turning to the Congress critters and wanting to start, introducing, exemptions, deductions, all the loopholes and stuff that is currently infest the income tax? What is to stop Congress from putting those things into the fair tax?
Yeah, and we posed that again. We sent that to Steve, and he responded. He said, the first sentence is a little disheartening, but he said, any system can be corrupted, okay? Yep. But he says, however, if you have an income tax, things can be done much more easily. We've seen that, all right? Bob just went over that there are 1,042 proposals to change the tax code. They're doing this with an income tax. It's very easy to change that income tax, and it's also not very obvious to the average American. However, with a sales tax, it's a different story, okay? And he goes on with the consumption tax, it is much more difficult, all right? With the sales tax, because it is much more visible.
Yeah.
Okay, it's much more visible.
All of these changes to the income tax get put in because they don't affect 99.97% of the people don't care if you're getting a credit for electric bicycles.
Yeah, and also think of this: it's the sales tax. 45 of the 50 states have a sales tax. Whatever state you're from, how often do you hear about changes to your state sales tax?
Yeah.
Yes, there are some loopholes, like for instance, in some cases they don't have the sales tax doesn't apply to food, okay? But that affects everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody equally. There's no winners or losers, okay?
Yeah. So, and you're not going to need deductions and exemptions in the fair tax to begin with because you get the prebate.
Yeah.
So, that much of your spending is an automatic free deduction.
Yeah.
And anything would be on top of that. So, I think just the fact that it would be legislatively possible for them to do that, but it would be much harder to make these special interest carve-outs into the fair tax, because that would have, if you start carving out for somebody, the rest of us have to make up the difference.
Yeah.
And if I see that my rate has gone up because you got a break, I'm coming after the guy that did that.
Yeah. And it's just with a consumption tax, like I said, 45 of the 50 states have a consumption tax. Changes affect everybody, and that would be the same with the fair tax. All right, any changes to the fair tax would affect everybody, and it's nearly impossible to hide. And we're going to be a lot more. It's going to be a lot more visible. Right.
Okay, so again, if you've got a what happens if kind of question in the back of your mind, even if it's a theoretical scenario that we could, of course, we're not going to do anything that's really way out in left field.
Yeah.
But if you've got a what happens if kind of thought in the back of your head, send it to us at the FAIRtaxGuys@gmail.com, and hopefully we'll get enough of these kind of questions. We'll run them by Steve, we'll run them by Randy, we'll make sure that the answers that we provide are authoritatively the truth and not misinformation.
Yep.
And of course, Yeah, I'd love to tackle that. What happens if? Because that a lot of times FAIRtax volunteers get asked that by people that they're talking to about the fair tax. And of course, I love the series that Jim Bennett is doing with the Grassroots Corner, all the different hostile questions that people can raise about it.
Yeah, that's good too.
Go back, read those, and get that information in your head. But
that's how FAIRtax volunteers learn. I can remember being brand new to the fair tax, even after having read the book. People ask questions that you don't anticipate, and I remember running to Nick and Barb. Hey, somebody asked me this, and we learn every time somebody asks us a question that we're not sure of, and we ask the experts. We learn, and everybody learns. So it's good to ask questions like that.
Now we are experts. We just make sure that tongue thoroughly planted in cheek there. We got about 3 minutes left to do our call to action. So we would again urge everyone who is not a member of AFFT, and you can join. There's no particular membership dues. You can join for whatever contribution you'd like to make. And every little, there was a rock song a long time ago that said every little bit helps or something.
Oh, absolutely.
That. So go down to join AFFT, go to fairtax.org. If you can, sign up for the 1040 Club.
Yeah.
Just $10.40. If you drink Starbucks, it's just 1 or 2 Starbucks a month that you can do without and send that to the Fair Tax movement.
Yep. And see if there's a state level fair tax organization. All right. When you go to fairtax.org, click through the different links up there, and you will find a list of the states, and you'll find a list of the people involved in the states, whatever state you're in. Okay, and if you don't have a strong organization in your state, maybe you can start one.
And there are several states that are looking at. Alabama and Georgia are the two that we mentioned a lot that have actual specific legislative proposals that they're working on to replace their state income tax with a consumption tax modeled on the fair tax. Nebraska just barely missed getting that through. Mm-hmm. We've also heard that Mississippi, there's no concrete proposal yet, but the governors of Mississippi and now Arkansas, it came out in the past couple of weeks, that the powers that be in Arkansas is, remember, that's where Sarah Huckabee Sanders is running.
Yeah,
and
that's
her dad
right. Yeah.
is a big fair tax supporter.
That's right.
So maybe we can get the fair tax passed in Arkansas if Sarah Sanders can be elected governor. And that would be pretty cool.
That's a good idea. Let's remember the FAIRtax store, fairtaxstore.org. Okay, it's kind of new in the past within the past 12 months. It's been revamped and so forth, but there's a lot of good stuff. Our friend Mike, one of our board members here in Florida, runs the store, so you can go there, and they've got it broken up into like apparel, banners, and so forth. And I want to mention the bumper stickers, those blue bumper stickers. Those are removable. Those are great.
Those are cool.
If you can think of a bumper sticker as being high tech, okay, because you can take it off and put it on another place, and take it off and put it on another place. They don't get sticky.
Yeah, it's static cling, not adhesive.
Yeah, it's great.
So that works pretty good. You can get palm cards free shipping as well, so you can get as many palm cards as you want. fairtaxstore.org.
And check out all of our social media sites. We're everywhere.
Yep. FairtaxGuys.com if you want to check out one of our previous episodes. And that's going to wrap up this edition of FairTax Power Radio. Thank you again so much for watching and listening. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
The FairTax Guys reminding you again, as we always do, that the fair tax is the only truly fair tax. And once you understand it,
you'll demand it. Thank you. Follow the FairTax Guys on social media and their own website, fairtaxguys.com, and check back every